Hello and welcome to Curtis Day Tutorials. This tutorial is on Flexbox layout in CSS and HTML5 in Dreamweaver. So here's kind of what we're going to make today, something similar to this, maybe not as detailed as this, but the point of this Flexbox is that we can build divs and not use floats to create our column layouts, and the boxes become flexible. You'll see that in this example my content 1 box here in the center is very flexible. It changes with the size of the content. In fact, we have a minimum size on this layout, so this would be perfect for if this website was being viewed on a tablet, probably a little too big for a cell phone to get flexible down to that size. That would be another tutorial that we'd be doing that, but you can see that this box keeps, it has a limit here right about there, 640 pixels. And then if I go bigger, the box stretches, all the boxes stretches out to accommodate the size of the browser. To do this in the past, it wasn't that hard, but we had to do a lot of math in the past, and that kind of stunk for a lot of people. So this Flexbox is a great new part of CSS3. It works in Mozilla, which is Firefox, and WebKit, which is Safari and Chrome. IE adoption is happening in Internet Explorer 10. So should be good for all browsers here pretty soon, if not now when you're watching this. Okay, so let's get started with a couple new documents. I'm going to minimize this one. That's what we're making. Let's go up to File and New in Dreamweaver, and we're going to pick in here, we're going to go and just create a new document from scratch. So I'm going to go to Blank Document, HTML None, and I'm going to pick HTML5 as our document. And then once I create this, we'll name it. So File, Save As. And let's save this as Flexbox Layout. I usually, again, all one word. And I'm going to do a 2 on here because I already have one. And click Save. And then we're going to need to make a CSS document that gets paired with this. So let's go to File, New, and we'll pick CSS. Click Create. And I'm going to save this as let's see, main. I usually use the word main or base, but I'm going to keep this so we know what it is. So I'm going to call it Fluxbox CSS, so it'll go with our layout here, and click Save. They have to go in the same folder, as you know. So here we go. We have nothing in either one of them. Let's start in the code. So we're going to start creating. Essentially, let's start creating our HTML first. And then we'll go back in and do the CSS part. So what we want to do is we want to get just some basic layout in HTML. So I'm going to go to the, I'm just going to close that down and go to the HTML portion. Now before we do that, of course, we have to connect the two documents. So the Flexbox layout is open, and I want to go to my CSS styles panel, and to connect that CSS document to this, all I have to do is go to the CSS styles panel down here at the bottom of it. I can go and attach the CSS style sheet that we just made by clicking that and going and browsing for it. So I'm going to go into my folder and go find, there it is, and say choose. And I'm just going to leave this just like this. I'm not going to click a media type or anything like that, and click OK. So now I've got these two files connected to each other, and you can see that Dreamweaver puts a little connection right here to it, so I can easily, I don't have to have the document open, it already automatically is. So here's the source code in HTML, and here's the Flexbox CSS. Alright, so let's go. You can notice we have an HTML5 document, so doc type HTML, that's the new HTML5 doc type call out, and then we're going to go down in here. You can see that the Flexbox is connected. And so let's create a little bit of our HTML here. Let's make a header. So I'm going to go inside the body tags, and we'll make a header. And this header is just going to be simple, basic. We're not doing too much to it. I'm going to type in the word header there so we know what it is. And actually I'm going to do the header, and I'll put that in an H1 tag. So just to keep this kind of, so we can control kind of the font in the header. So I'm going to go H1 tag, and now I'll type the word header in there, and close that H1 tag, and then close the header. And then I'm going to hit return. So there's our header right now. If I hit refresh, you'll see that I've got something going on my design view side. And after we do the header, then we're going to move on and do in HTML5. We have a couple new things in there. We have sections and articles, and so we're going to make and some asides. So we'll use a little bit of HTML5 for this. So I'm going to, below the header, I'm going to call this a section. So we'll go to, let's see right here, click here, go section, and click return. And then inside the section, I'm going to, this is, oh, excuse me, no bracket there. I'm going to say section ID. And then we haven't made any of this stuff yet in CSS. We haven't, I'm going to do a main in here. So section ID equals, and this is going to be the main container. I can call this container if I want to as well. So main. And then I'm going to do a class of Flexbox, or just class, and I'm going to, again, it could be named anything when we make a class up here. So I'm going to, we'll refer to this back in the CSS in a second, but this I'm going to just name Flexbox. And then close that. And then inside this section, we're going to have a couple boxes. Okay, so after we've made our section ID main with the class of Flexbox, let's now make our first box within main. So main's going to be the parent that's going to hold 3 boxes in there. So let's, inside this box, make another section that's going to be box 1. So I'm going to say section ID. I'm going to make that a div. So all IDs, of course, we know are divs, and I'm going to call this box 1. We haven't made this yet in the CSS, of course. And I'm going to just do box -1, quotation marks around it. Again, that's any name that I want to name this. And then I'm going to give this a class of Flexbox as well. So class equals and Flexbox. I haven't made the CSS style for this yet, so that's why it's not popping up. We'll be making that next. Quotation marks around it. I'm just kind of getting it ready here. Now I'm not going to close this box 1 yet, because I'm going to put some stuff in it. So I'm going to leave this box 1 open. We'll close it in a little bit. So in fact, I could close it now if I want to, and do that and just get it ready, and then just kind of put some white space in between there and get this ready. So that might be a way that you might want to work. But we're going to put a few tags in here. I'm going to do an H1 tag, and this one's going to be called about content. And box 1, just for clarity, so we know what's going on here. And then we need to have some paragraphs in here, so we see some content. So I'm going to do a P tag, and then I'm going to go to lorem ipsum. I'm just going to grab some lorem ipsum off the web. So I like to go to ipsum.com, and I'm just going to copy and paste a couple paragraphs. So here's one, Command C, and paste that in there, and then close that P tag. Oops. Close that P tag. So now I have a paragraph within box 1. You can have more than one paragraph if I want. It's not necessary. If you want to have a couple paragraphs, it might be nice. So one thing you could do is we probably could just shorten this. So I'm going to Command X, shorten this, and then create another paragraph in here as well. So I could do that, and then just paste a smaller amount, so we have 2 separate paragraphs. That might be kind of nice. So there we go. Over here in design view, you can see we've got the 2 paragraphs. And once I have those 2 paragraphs, then that section is done. That box ID number 1 is done. So we've got essentially, here's one whole box sitting inside the parent of main, and we haven't closed main down yet. And then we've got the header up top, which is open and closed. So we're moving along here. So let's make our second box. Again, both of these, these boxes are inside main. So let's create our second box, which we'll just, this one we're going to do a little bit differently. Instead of a section, we'll call it an aside. So this is, again, another HTML5. deal. So I'm going to call this aside and then give it an ID equals box2. So that's pretty easy. Keep them consistent is a good bet here for you. So aside box2, and then we want to give this the same class, and you'll understand this when we get there in part 2 of this tutorial. We're going to give this same class the Fluxbox class. So I'm going to go here. Now again, I'm just making up. I could call this, instead of class Fluxbox, I could call it class Lightning. It doesn't matter what I call this as long as I connect the two. Okay, I'm just calling it Fluxbox, so later down the line we know what this is doing. Okay, so this is not a name that Dreamweaver or CSS3 came up with. Yes, we're making something called a Flexbox, so I just wanted to name it what it was so we knew what was going on. Okay, within this aside too, we'll have, I'll just do an H1 tag in here so that so we know what this is, and we're going to call this sidebar, and then I'll just call it box2 so we know. And close that H1 tag, and then just one little small paragraph inside this sidebar is fine. So I'm just going to copy this, and maybe I even want it shorter than that, but I'm going to copy this little guy right here and cut off a sentence. We don't need it that big in there. So now we've got this setup right here. We got a header, content box, sidebar, and then we'll move on to, once this is done, we can close that aside, right? So we have the aside div open right here. We need to close it after this paragraph. So let's do that. So there we go, closed. So now we can move on to the third box, and if we need to do a footer, we could do that too. But let's move on to the third box, which we'll do as our navigation box. So on this one, we'll just call it a nav, N-A-V, and ID. We're going to make it a div, and then we're going to do equal sign. So this is all done exactly the same way. We're going to call this box number 3. So they're all divs. They're just different kinds of divs. And then we'll give it a class of, you guessed it, Flexbox. So same thing. We want to keep it, consistent here. Again, if I had already made the CSS code, this little code hint box that comes up would have the word Flexbox in it. But we haven't made the CSS yet, so we have to type it in every time for now. Okay, and then close that. Close that opening tag, and now again we're going to put some stuff in here. But some of you, like me, like to open and close these tags right off the bat, and then just put white space within there. And then let's put our H1 nav in here, like we've been doing. H1 tag in here, and we'll call this nav bar, or just nav, and then I'm going to call it box 3 so we know what it is, and close that. And then we'll just do some links in here. We'll highlight these and then use our properties panel just to create quick links so we don't have to do it all in code, take too much time up. So I'm just going to highlight ESPN. I'm going to go to my HTML properties, and I'm going to do the absolute web address for ESPN. So espn.go.com. You can put the www in here, but not necessary for that. And then http://cnn.com. Of course, these are absolute address and not relative, so that's why we have the http on there, ://. And again, if I want to do the www, I can, just to be safe. But these are pretty big websites. They don't need to have the www on them. All right, let's go back to code view. So now I've got a couple links within there, and if I go to design view, I see the links down in there. Perfect. And now I want to close. So we've got the links in here. We should be ready to go on that. Now what we want to do is we want to close the section that we created up here. So we created this main section right up here. We want to close this down here. So we want to go down here and put a closed section. So we're good. We have that box totally done. And if we want to put a footer on here, we can. So I'm going to go down here and do a little quick footer, just like we did the header. Might as well. And I can put that anywhere. And if I want to type in, just so I know what it is, do an H1 tag once again, and do, say, footer, and then close the footer. There we go. So now, and I can put this down here so it's not all on one line so you guys can see it. And if people get, sometimes people get confused by everything being on one line, I'm just going to do something like that. So then there's our footer. And if I go to split view and we scroll down here, now we can see the footer down there. So we've got a basic setup here. And this would be a similar setup for mobile, actually. We just kind of, this is how we will start creating stuff when we do mobile sites within CSS and HTML5. So I make all the HTML first for the setup, and then we'll move on in part 2 of this tutorial to the Flexbox CSS file, and we'll start making this stuff look the way it's supposed to do, style it so that it has flexible layout using the Flexbox model. All right, see you in part 2.